Hello there, and welcome to English with Monty. As you can't see at the moment yet, but he will come on screen when he says something. I have Gideon. Hi, Gideon. How are you doing?
Oh, you're talking to me? Yeah. Yes, hi. Hello, John.
Hi. How are you doing? You
Hi.
okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's a cloudy day in Paris, but
Lovely. Well,
all
it's
is fine.
it's a rainy day in Folkestone, so you're doing better than us. So,
Okay.
or in John O'Groats, as I should say. Yeah.
John Gross. Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
I like that.
so obviously we've talked about kind of literature, British books in literature, but this is slightly different, really, because it's focusing more on the idea of what books English learners can read. And I did a blog post on this, and I think I released it, when was it? Back in July. And it's talking about different levels. So we're gonna have a look at different levels depending on where you are. And I was thinking that maybe you could add some others if you have any other suggestions, and we can go from there, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
does that mean you might have some
Possibly.
recommendations,
No,
or
maybe I have. Maybe I have
okay,
to think of something. Yeah.
okay, no, that's fair enough.
Let's go with it.
Let's go with it. Yeah. So first of all, well, James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. I think Roald Dahl books are always good for English learners, aren't they? Really. I guess we have spoken about him previously, and he does have some fairly controversial views, but his books, or he did have
Yeah,
some
he's
fairly
uh,
controversial views, but
an awful person, but he wrote some good books,
yeah, yeah,
can we say?
let's say that.
You don't be put off by his biography, or maybe do be put off by his biography, but it cannot be denied that he wrote some very good books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, it
and
was what I grew up with, really. I mean, I really
yeah, so did
enjoyed
I.
Roald Dahl books, and I thought
Yeah,
they're full of kind of wonder and fantasy, aren't they? I mean, I think as children they're great for the imagination,
exactly.
and even as an
Exactly. Yeah.
adult, they're very good for that, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
I've reread a few of his books as an adult and still thoroughly enjoyed them. I thought they were great books. Why would you say they're kind of good for English learners? And I mean, my kind of level here, so maybe also you can critique slightly the levels that I've given here. I said here A2 would probably be okay. So I guess that's kind of pre-intermediate level, isn't it?
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. A2, B1.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes he uses some more difficult language, but his sentences are really well constructed, and it fires up the imagination as well. Very imaginative, so I think that's why kids like it as well. And some very sort of interesting storylines
Mm.
and unexpected outcomes.
Indeed. I suppose most people know about his work as well through the films, don't they? Because obviously there's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, yeah,
They've
exactly.
they've done BFG as well, haven't they? Um, and have they done
I don't know
any
the BFG.
others?
I don't know
Yeah,
that one.
yeah, they have done the BFG. Yeah, I think they've done it
What
once or twice. I think they've
what is the BFG? I don't know the book. I didn't know the book.
the Big Friendly Giant.
It's strange. I don't know that one. Yeah. I
Honestly,
read Matilda,
okay.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Joseph Giant Peach. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Matilda's been made into maybe a West End show, hasn't it? And I think there was a film as well with Matilda.
Yeah.
And James and the Giant Peach, I'm pretty sure they made that into an animation or something.
Yeah.
So they have been remade, haven't they? So if you're not familiar with them as books, then you should definitely check them out.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So I did check them out. Hmm.
I think personally, I think my favorite is Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I just saw it was on Netflix there was a version of that.
Hmm.
They 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 covered that. a cartoon version.
Hmm.
But um, and no, yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. Sorry, John. Is that? Can you hear some drilling?
No, I do. It's kind of I don't know. In terms of your sound, though, sometimes it's fading out a little bit just because of
I shouldn't move my head too much, and at least you
no.
can bump it up if I'm too low. But if I move, then it's going to be up and down. That's what you don't want.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
um. Okay, so should we move on to the next one? So this is another one that's considered A2. So The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Have you read this one?
That's an interesting point. I may. It's strange when you say you've forgotten if you read the book or not. I think I've read some of it
Ah,
a while. He has kind of autism or something. The
yeah, that's
author,
right.
is that right?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
It's all about that.
Hmm, hmm.
I seem to think it was good, but you'll have to talk more about it.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I suppose he becomes a bit of a local detective and tries to find out if the dog's, yeah, who killed the dog,
Yeah,
and he, yeah, I think that's right that he was autistic. So he was very good at mathematics in particular.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think there were kind of elements that made it a little bit more difficult for him with his relationship with neighbors, etc. Um,
yeah.
but the interesting thing about it, at least for me, was that it's based in Willesden Green, which is where I used to live.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
so that's another element of it because he lived in that area.
yeah.
Uh, but I think, yeah, this is quite a simple, straightforward book. I would definitely say A2 seems to be the right kind of level for that. I mean, do
Hmm.
you remember what kind of language there was, whether it was too difficult?
I no, I think you're right. A2 again, B1 maybe. I mean, yeah, certainly it's very approachable.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Definitely.
it's not too long, is it, really? And I think that's another key feature to these kind of level books is that you don't get too bored of it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a good length. It's not too much.
exactly.
Yeah. How
Exactly.
about other books potentially for that level? What would you say? Have you any that come off the top of your head?
Of that level,
Yeah, yeah.
oh,
So a bit of a lower level.
there's a book I always recommend to my students, and I recommend it on my, I think on my YouTube channel as well. And that's a compilation of stories by Paul Auster, and it's called Tales of American Life. And
Mm,
it's not the book, the stories aren't written by Paul Auster, but they're all one-page stories,
mm,
which were sent in to Paul Auster. He received thousands. He called out for people to send in their stories. They're true stories about something that happened to them, and he got thousands and thousands of replies. And he's the best one he compiled into a book, and it's called Tales of American Life. And each one is like a page long, maybe 2 pages at max. And it's really good if you're learning English and or you have a little busy life and you don't want to read a 300-page novel, then you could just dip in any page.
mm.
So if you're starting out to A2 level, definitely. Even I want to A1, but if with a dictionary, even at a low level, you can start on that one. I thought that's great. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that excuse me. Yeah, that does sound great. Yeah, I mean something like that is perfect though, isn't it, for a lower level? Because as you say, you can just dip in and out, can't you? You can just have a quick look at a random story, can't you? And just see how it is. And yeah, it's nice doing that.
Exactly. It's not so famous. It's not as famous as his other books, but it's really interesting if you're learning English, I think, and I recommend that one a lot. The other one, which is famous, I think we might have talked about it before, John, is Animal Farm.
Hmm.
Um, that's a great work of literature. It works on several levels. You can read it as a child, you read literally, but then it's a satire about Soviet Union, about authoritarianism, and about life itself. So it works on several different levels, but it's easy to read.
Would you say it was A2, B1? Is it that kind of level?
Well, the language is easy, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I
The
suppose it
language
is.
is
Yeah.
easy.
Mm,
It's written like a sort of children's story, isn't it? But
mm.
certainly it's much deeper.
Yeah,
Goes much deeper. But
it
certainly,
has.
if yeah,
Yeah, it has a deep meaning, doesn't it? Yeah, definitely. But I think that's it, isn't it? I suppose it works really well from that point of view, doesn't it? Because you're in a farm, aren't you? I mean, that's why it's called Animal Farm. It's
yeah,
about the animals kind of creating their own society, really, isn't it? Yeah, with
yeah.
the
The pig is
humans.
taking control.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of us are more equal
Spoiler
than others.
alert. Spoiler alert. It doesn't end happily. Uh,
No.
oh well.
Oh well. Yeah, but I think that's a good recommendation. I think we're going to come up with, well, there's going to be another George Orwell novel as well a bit later on. So
Oh,
the other ones, well, the next one's going up to B1. I always recommend this one to my students, and that's The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And I think, is that something that you've read at all? Uh, is it a book that you know
John.
about?
Uh, John. This is quite touchy subject, really.
Is it?
Uh, because I know there are hundreds of millions of people that love this book. That's all I can say, but I'm not one of them.
Are
So
you not?
I absolutely hated it,
Ooh.
and I absolutely hated it. But that's just me. I say that's just me. I just yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Why did you hate it?
Well, if you believe in it, I can't remember the philosophy. So if you believe in it enough, it's going to happen, and follow your dreams type philosophy. That type of stuff. It was just no. I just thought it was no.
Too
I'm
optimistic.
very. I'm not. People love it, and I respect that. And people see things differently. You read the same book, and some books that I love, people hate. So it's like that. But that's not one of my favorites, we say.
No, fair enough.
But
I
so
mean,
you go ahead. You tell me why you liked it. Tell me why you liked it.
well, to be honest, I probably read it about 15 or so years ago. So it'd be interesting if I read it again, if I'd have the same point of view. I think at the time I was looking for a bit of direction, bit of inspiration, and it seemed to tick the boxes. And I can understand why you might not like it. Um, well, you don't like it because it can be a bit too much, isn't it? Um, maybe it is a bit too dreamy in a way, a bit too spiritual in a way. I think if you're in a certain point in your life, it can probably help. I think also as well, I think linguistically it's quite straightforward, isn't it? And it's not really very long.
it's easy to read. That's true.
Hmm.
But there are lots of books that are easy to read, but doesn't mean doesn't mean I'm going to recommend them. I
Yeah.
don't like them. I know like Dan Brown's books are extremely popular, um, or Jeffrey Archer, but personally I hate them. But that's just me. As I said, if that's what you like, if that's your thing, then um, okay.
Yeah, well, that's it,
It
isn't
sounds like a
it?
grumpy,
No, but
man. No.
I think a lot of the time though, I tend to agree the very popular novels I would not necessarily read. As I said, I'm not really sure what my viewpoint would it be of it nowadays, but I think if you're taking it purely from a literary point of view, and you are in a stage of your life where you want a bit, maybe a bit of inspiration, or yeah, just a feeling a bit spiritual, I suppose. Maybe those are factors involved in it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, people can will like it. Yeah. You say popular novels aren't good novels. That's not true. I mean, I think you're gonna mention Harry Potter, which I think is great.
Mm. Yeah,
I
yeah,
love Harry Potter. I think I've read all the Harry Potters or anything. But that's extremely popular. It's fantastic. Again, it's another thing which really enlivens the imagination, not just of kids, but of adults too.
yeah,
Um,
very much
I
so.
said about Harry Potter because I thought for language learner, I read the first one in French when I came to France because I thought, oh, what shall I read here? I thought, oh, French literature is going to be too difficult. But if I start something like in a translation like Harry Potter, I know all the references and I've seen the movie. So I learned lots of words um, about witches and broomsticks and stuff like that in French. Um, so it was good exercise. So to read that one, yeah.
Yeah,
I know a lot of my students who don't read in English, but they read Harry Potter. They read Harry Potter in English because it came out in English before it came out in French,
oh wow,
and they couldn't wait. They couldn't wait that long to read the book.
oh wow,
One student who's retired now, but she's was a massive Harry Potter fan
wow.
as a little kid. Yeah.
That's pretty cool,
So
isn't it?
no, I think Harry Potter's great.
Yeah. No,
So it's
what?
not just because it's popular, it's not good. No, no, I don't say that at all.
No, well, I think
But as for The Alchemist,
there's
no comment.
no, but I think that's one of the elements though, isn't it? I think is very popular books. They are obviously popular for a reason, but I think some, well, certainly for me, I think there's some that I would avoid. Um, you know, I suppose to some extent the subject matter, isn't it? I mean, I like there's lots of thrillers that are really popular or kind of crime novels that people really love.
Well, you bring up an interesting point as well, because thrillers, a crime story, almost by definition, the language has to be simpler. There are a
Hmm.
few exceptions. It's easier, so you know if you pick up a detective story, the language is going to be relatively easy. But once again, even like people love Agatha Christie, and they say she's one of the great writers. No, she's one of the selling writers, but she's a great writer. It's not literature. The big, it's just it's a detective story, which she does very well. But no, it's not. It's not George Orwell. It's not Dickens.
Mm,
It's not Shakespeare when you read Agatha Christie. Not at all. It's very simple language,
mm.
but she's extremely successful.
Yeah, and if you like those kind of books, it's very much worth reading, isn't it? And I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
least for me, it doesn't really appeal to me. And I think with something like Harry Potter, obviously you're focusing a lot more on words to do with magic, witches, wizards, and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you think about everyday language, some of it is not very useful, right? So, I mean, like the fact that you know those words in the French language, how often do you use them? Do you use them?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, if you're learning a language, the objective is to start it and to finish it.
Mm, yeah.
That's actually to especially if you're in on level, A2, B1, uh, that if you manage to read a book in a foreign language from beginning to the end, that is a major achievement. And also push up your level. Whatever book it is, it'll push up your level. Um, so so yeah, whatever it is, it's okay.
Mm, yeah, definitely. No, there's
And
no
it's not the
doubt
only
about
not
it.
only words in Harry Potter about sorcerers and wizards.
That's true.
No,
That's
so
true.
there's enough things happening along the way.
There's some about
So
Quidditch as
Harry,
well, and yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's it, isn't it? It's just an element of it, but as you said, it really does boost your language skills. It gives you more confidence, doesn't it? If you've read a book in that language. I mean, I certainly reading Italian books, it's like it's a sense of accomplishment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's quite a special thing reading, and you can tell a difference as a English teacher, can't you, if people are reading or not?
Yeah.
Right, these next three, they are books that I've never
There we
read.
go. Oh.
I'm wondering if you've ever read any of
Oh.
these, but I think I'm going to have to read at least one of them, if not all of them.
Why are they here on your list?
They are here on my list because I did a bit of research and they suggested these particular books. I mean, the first one, The House
They,
on
they,
Man, yes,
who's
people.
this they you're talking about?
Well, I mean
When
the
people say they,
yes,
I always think, yeah, yeah.
it's
I think,
it's
well,
just
who is this they?
smart people, isn't it?
Smart people. Okay.
Well, apparently, the first one, The House on Mango Street, is actually taught at school in the States, in the United States. And it's often in English classes and school and university. And the reason why is because of a Mexican American girl. So I guess it's about her adjusting to her life in the United States. And also, there's short stories and it's like a diary style, and also it's only 103 pages. So all of those elements make it quite interesting. And I suppose it's probably more appealing, obviously, to migrants going to the United States rather than coming to Britain. But I think even so, you can relate to it. And it's a good, you know, thing to, yeah,
Okay.
to
Well, maybe I'll
relate
read it and come back to you. I can't really comment now
to.
because I haven't read it.
Of course, but it sounds interesting, don't you think? I
Okay.
mean, and the length of it is not too bad.
Don't know.
And
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
and the Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Do you know
I
about
know
that?
John, I read the book. I know John Green.
Okay,
I
great.
watched some of his YouTube videos
Hmm.
and he's absolutely brilliant. He's extremely eloquent and imaginative. When you start watching him, you know that he's a writer. And so he's really good. So I've just watched him on YouTube. So haven't read his books, I must say, but I'm knowing him. I would say yeah, he's gonna be good, but I can't say I've read the book though.
Okay, sure. I mean,
I think his
apparently
brother
it's
as well. His brother, what's his name? His brother is also famous, don't isn't it? Isn't
Bob
he?
Green. Don't know.
Um, the name escapes me now, but John Green's very, very good.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, this
Yeah.
particular book is supposed to be for hopeless romantics. So it's humorous and witty, but at the same time very sad. And the vocabulary is edgy, but has a young vibe to it. So that makes it a lively and
I
appealing
think his
read.
books are for like teenagers, aren't they?
I guess they probably are, yeah.
Think so, but I'm not sure. But he's very
Yeah.
good. That's all I
w-
can say.
Well, it seems to be the case, yeah. And I think this is it's about cancer support as well for a cancer support group, I should say, for teens. So yes, I mean it is kind of more teenage based. So, but again, with that kind of thing, it doesn't really matter what your age is. I mean, I suppose it makes the language a bit more accessible, doesn't it, potentially? So I
Yeah.
think that's why it's worth
Okay.
looking at.
Okay.
Um, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Have
I've
you heard that
never.
one?
I have. To be honest, I haven't heard of this one.
Well, I'd never heard of this one either, but again, the smart people say it's a touching, heartwarming, and funny story. So it's about an ordinary office worker with a very boring life. So it could well be you before you became an English
My
teacher.
biography. Yeah,
Yes.
autobiography. Yeah.
Eating
Yeah.
frozen pizza after a day, you know, well, not actually frozen pizza, but warming it up, of course, hopefully. And
Then you just suck on it like a lollipop.
indeed. But yeah, having a very boring existence with boring life. So maybe you should write something similar because you can perhaps relate
Maybe too
to
close to the bone, that one,
it.
maybe.
But is
Uh,
it was something that you can relate to though. I mean, I'm not even joking. You do
I've
you
done
did
boring office jobs, certainly. Yeah,
yeah
I have.
yeah
I have.
yeah.
Everything.
It was what inspired you to go to Spain, wasn't it originally?
No, not exactly, but I did them earlier on in my illustrious career. I worked before I got an interesting office job. I had some boring office jobs. So before I was sort of qualified in IT, actually,
Hmm.
did some boring office jobs. Yeah.
But it's about how this character learns how to adapt and grow. So again, that can be related to you, the way you've you know blossomed as a flower
I
over
don't
the
know.
years.
Maybe I'll have a look. I'll have a look at the book next time
Yeah,
we're in the bookshop.
yeah. Again, kind of B1, B2. This one, and we'll move on to the slightly harder ones. So we got 1984 by George Orwell. So this is considered like a C1.
Yeah,
I
certainly.
I
Do
would
you remember how it
say.
starts? The first line. It's got one of the most famous first lines.
Do you know what? I don't. You're gonna have to tell me.
I'm going to quickly Google it so I don't get it wrong.
Okay.
I'll pick up the copy of my bookshelf. Um, all right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13.
Mm, I like that.
That immediately captures your imagination and makes you sit up and go, "What?
Yeah, it
What's
does.
this all about?" Yeah. So from the
Mm,
very first line.
mm. Well, yeah, 13 hours in a day. Yeah, or not. 26 hours,
Mm.
maybe. Ah.
Maybe there were 100. They were striking
I,
13. We didn't say how many they go up to.
that's true. That's
Maybe it
true.
was 100 hours in a day. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, it tells you of something otherworldly, doesn't it? And again, I mean, similar to Animal Farm, isn't it? There's a deeper message, and arguably our world has become quite like this now,
Mm.
because it's about totalitarianism, isn't it? And being monitored, and also Big Brother is watching you, which is a sinister thing.
Like so many words from that book have entered the English language, haven't they?
They have.
From Big Brother to Newspeak and oh, now the others escape me. But uh, there are, yeah, and Big Brother was the bad guy, of course.
Hmm.
Now, with the TV show, Big Brother was the good guy. But yeah, thought police, that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's about being monitored, isn't it, more than anything? And I guess yeah, the
and it's all become true. It's come true, hasn't it?
yes,
And
yeah,
all the things he said that people are watching you all the time, and they know what you're thinking, they know what you're doing, and yeah, with sort of social media and all this stuff, and now that it's true.
mm,
Everything's tracked. Everything is tracked. That's exactly what George Earl was saying in the 1930s when he wrote it.
yeah, yeah. Well, wasn't it? Where I think it was the end of the 40s, wasn't it? Because it wasn't it 1947. I seem to remember
Was it? Okay.
because it kind of
It could be. Yeah,
flipped
yeah, yeah.
around.
You're right. You're
Yeah,
right. You're right. Yes.
but yeah, it's for the time that it was written, it was an incredible piece of work, wasn't it? I mean, regardless of when it was written, I suppose, but it's also adds to to its appeal, doesn't it? Really, the fact that it was way ahead of its time.
I think, yeah, at the time you thought, well, this is a great exaggeration. I
Hmm.
mean, come on, you know, these authorities don't know what we're doing inside our home once we shut the door. That's not true.
Yeah.
Um, so that's very interesting. Of course, it's about totalitarianism, as you say, and the things that can lead up to it, and how
Yeah.
we should prevent it.
Yeah. It's definitely a C1 novel, though, isn't it? It's quite a
It's a
challenging.
masterpiece. It is a
Hmm.
masterpiece. So, a dystopian novel, as they call it. So, if you've got a good level, yeah,
Yeah. And
worth reading.
I read recently, I think I probably mentioned it to you, but Down and Out in Paris and London. I
Oh,
think
yeah, yeah.
that was his first novel, wasn't it? And I think
Okay.
if you like Animal Farm and you like 1984, definitely read that one because it was of his time.
But that wasn't enough. That was sort of uh, an essay, wasn't it? He actually lived
Yeah,
in
that
Paris
that's true.
and in
That's
London,
true.
didn't he? Yeah,
Yeah, because he before he really made it as an author, he was
hmm,
talking about his experiences,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm guessing that because of publishing that novel, maybe that obviously helped him, uh, you know, progress his career. But it was very very interesting because it was how poor, if you're not well to do and you haven't got much money, it was a hand to mouth existence that he was having,
yeah.
and it's very interesting to read.
I think George Orwell is an interesting writer because, or each of his books deals in very different themes
Hmm.
as well. You know, obviously he's somebody who's quite political and is fighting for the common man and against totalitarianism. But but there's some very different stories in there. I read one which is one of his least famous books called "Keep the Aspidistra Flying,"
Hmm.
about his time working in a bookshop on Charing Cross Road in London
Hmm.
and being very poor. I think it's semi-autobiographical because it actually happened to him. And that's another story, and it's partly a love story, partly a book about books.
Hmm.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And he used to be a journalist. He wrote, if you want to know how to make a cup of tea, you know how to make a cup of tea, George Orwell wrote um, an article about that for the Evening Standard. So you can find that online as well. So it's covered so many topics.
Wow. So he didn't just say put a tea bag in a cup of
This is
boiling water.
before tea bags existed, actually.
Mm.
He said you don't use a strainer. Probably people don't know what strainer is, and it's not if they use tea bags. Personally, I don't like tea bags. No, real tea shouldn't be real tea. Don't use a tea bag. Don't use a tea bag. Doesn't matter how expensively packaged it is, and but no, loose tea is always better. That's
Yeah,
controversial. I'm
it's
getting
all.
cancelled now.
Well, I don't think I'd agree
Loose
with you
tea
there.
is
Definitely.
better.
Yeah,
Um,
it's probably a bit more fiddly, isn't it? But it's definitely better in terms of
exactly. It's
taste
it's
and for
not
the
that much
environment.
hard work. And people nowadays, have you noticed that, a few years ago people made instant coffee in a tea bag, and now lots and lots of people don't make instant coffee anymore. They've decided no, they're going to get a cafetiere or a coffee machine or whatever, an AeroPress, and they'll make proper coffee. But that hasn't happened to tea yet. It's still like, I will use a tea bag, but there's not much extra work involved, is there? Just put something nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
That's true. I
make
agree.
the real tea if you're going to make tea.
I agree. I agree. In fact, where we met, first of all, what was the name of the tea shop?
Oh yeah, yeah, yum cha, yeah. Yeah,
Yumcha.
it
Yeah,
doesn't exist
they
anymore.
used to
Yeah,
make loose leaf tea, didn't they? And
I do object. I mean, I understand why people use tea bags. I never use tea bags. I'm going to talk about books. I don't talk about tea bags. But if you go to a cafe and I spend £5 for a cup of tea, I want real tea. I don't want them to just put a tea bag in hot water and serve it to me. No, if you're going to spend that amount of money, then give me the real McCoy, the real thing. You know that expression, the real McCoy.
yeah. Indeed. So basically, you're advocating drinking real tea while you're reading these books.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying
Definitely.
to
We'll have to
bring
make
it
a
bring it
another
back there.
podcast about real tea. I'm
Yeah.
an advocate.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sure people who are learning the English language will be interested in hearing about that. So yes, we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. There's a couple more, and I'm pretty sure I have read one of them, which is The Kite Runner, which I read such a long time ago that I don't really remember it, but it's a very nice story about two best friends in Afghanistan, and there's loads of challenges. And well, here it says it's an ideal choice for anybody preparing for the IELTS exam. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I guess it is because it's easy enough to read. It's not super complicated, but it's certainly for people at a higher level. It's kind of about relationships, guilt, kind of redemption, and then aspects of the past that were really uncompromising, unpleasant. So, have you read this one? I mean, I think
No, but you know what? That
there's
book,
a
I've
film.
heard about it. That's on my list of books I really want to read, actually.
Oh, yeah, excellent.
So, and now you've mentioned it, it's piqued my curiosity again. But uh, I have heard of it because it's been recommended by so many people
Hmm.
that, yeah, okay,
I think I'm gonna
I'll
have
come back to you.
to, yeah, I think I'll have to
But
reread it to be honest, because honestly, I think I must have read it about 20 years ago, and I don't
right,
truly
right.
remember it. So yeah, I think I'll have to have a look at that again. And To Kill a Mockingbird, again,
Mm.
higher level. This is something that's on my list to read. I've never read it though, but I imagine you have.
I think I have a long, long time ago. When I was a kid, I think I read it.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I don't want to talk too much about it because I can't remember so well how much I liked it. But yeah,
But it's
um,
it's kind of like a class.
definitely a classic.
Yeah,
Definitely a
it's definitely a
classic.
classic, isn't it?
I just can't remember it so well. That was such a long time
Yeah.
ago.
So about an African American family in the early 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a sad plot, but overall the language is pretty easy to understand, and it's a popular read. Again, I suppose, yeah, obviously it's American literature. It's about the Deep South in the United States,
Yeah,
so I guess it's
yeah.
very,
Deep South,
yeah,
racism,
hmm, exactly. So
stuff like that.
it's an important historical um, vantage point, I guess, or yeah, element of what was going on in the
Yeah,
United States at the time.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, because I read, I mean, this would definitely go into a C1 category. It's quite a big book, Grapes of Wrath,
Oh
and
yeah.
that would be
Great
again,
book. Great
yeah,
book.
it's an excellent book. It's again, it's quite sad, I would say, for readers. Like I don't know. I mean, I suppose because of the way they speak, because there's a lot of dialogue in it, isn't there? It can be a little bit tricky, I would say, for non-native speakers because of the way they speak. You kind of got to get into
The
the
Okies.
characters. Yes, exactly.
The Okies people from Oklahoma. I think it's a really interesting like, historically because on so many levels it's a great novel, and then it's also interesting historically. You learn about that time period,
Hmm.
but you also learn about the racism that you don't think of anymore. People were racist against people from Oklahoma,
Yes.
white people, white people from Oklahoma because they were Okies and they were poor and they were escaping the it's called the Dust Belt, is it? And trying to find a better life somewhere else. So there's migration, internal migration in the States, and so this sort of um, fear and hatred of outsiders, it's nothing new. Now it's aimed maybe more against people crossing the border from Mexico, but before as people crossing the border from Oklahoma. Do you think so, John? You read it recently.
Yeah, very, very much
Uh,
so. And Okies was kind of a blanket term, wasn't it? They would just call
Yeah,
people, it didn't
yeah.
have to
Not
be
only from
from
you
Oklahoma.
exactly. exactly.
Yeah, but it was considered a derogatory term, wasn't it? And it was about California as well. I mean, arguably, well, I suppose the basis for the way California became today was from that period of time. Lots of people who owned land, and they had a real fear of these people taking over their land. So they were almost, yeah,
Yeah. These
forcibly
Orkies
removing
coming
people.
over, taking
Mm,
our jobs, stealing
yeah.
our women, whatever.
Well, but
Uh,
it
yeah,
was madness, though, wasn't it? In the sense that I suppose it was before we had I don't know, communism and fascism, wasn't it? Because it was in the Great Depression. I mean, I suppose it was the start of it, where they were exploiting workers to the extent where people just couldn't survive on the
yeah.
wages that
And
they
it
were
touches on the
receiving.
New Deal, doesn't it? I think it's a long time ago and I read it.
Uh,
Uh,
I'm yeah. I mean, I suppose I didn't. It doesn't. Well, does it? I don't think it really
maybe not.
does.
Okay, you read it more recently than I did, but
I mean, I guess that's what's to come, isn't it?
yeah,
And it's about, these workers being considered communists, aren't they? Because they just want wages to survive, and
yeah.
you know, and then the landowners taking advantage of that fact, really.
Sure.
Um, so
What
yeah, it
what
was a big change.
what's interesting if you see the film, I
Hmm.
don't know if you've seen have you seen the film, John?
No, I haven't. No.
Uh, well, what's interesting in the film, which is a very, very good film, but in the book, I don't want to spoiler alert here, but in the book, it doesn't have a very optimistic ending. But in the film, they thought, nah, we want a happy ending. So they sort of changed the ending.
Yeah.
That's really, it's a very good film, but they changed the ending just to make it more suitable for the public who wanted something more positive.
Well,
So that's curious, isn't it?
that makes sense because yeah, the ending is a little bit sad, isn't it? And probably not for the public in many ways. So yeah, it's very sad, isn't it? The ending and a bit I don't know,
Yeah.
the sign of the times, let's say. It was
Yeah.
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 If that was in the film, I don't think the
The
film.
film's from the also from about that period. Not it was made soon after the book, I think. But
Oh, really? Oh, well. Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
I've checked online, but it's an old film.
mm,
Maybe a few
mm.
years after a few years after the book came out.
Yeah, so Matt Damon can't have been in it then.
No, no,
Oh,
no.
fair enough. So do you want to talk about anything extra? And if not, do you want to tell people about your YouTube channel?
I could mention though one thing which is
Hmm.
just curious and it was interesting to your listeners because I mentioned before that I hadn't read that book since I was a kid, but it just reminded me something that happened recently that um, I, as a kid, I think a teenager, I read The Great Gatsby and I absolutely hated it. And it
Mm.
was such a struggle to finish it. And recently, I picked it up again and started reading it, and I absolutely loved it. And it's strange, isn't it? The same book. Has the book changed or have I changed? So clearly it's me, but we change. So any readers out there, any listeners out there who read a book when they were a kid and hated it, well, maybe try again. Maybe you're not the same person.
Yeah, that's good advice. And interestingly enough, I've started reading The Great Gatsby
Oh, no
recently.
way. Really?
Yeah, and
Do you
and
like
I
it?
and no, I can't get into
Okay.
it. I know
Okay.
it's a very short novel, but for some reason it's not doing anything for me. I've kind of
Okay.
read about 25 pages and
Okay.
stopped a couple of months ago. So
You just have to enjoy the language, and
yeah.
then you have to read it slowly as well. I
Hmm.
think that's the same with Scott Fitzgerald's books. You have to read them slowly
Hmm.
and linger on every word. But I'm not saying if you don't like it, you don't like it. I'm not saying because I hated it when I read it the first time,
Mm.
but Oh, that's interesting. You didn't like it, or you're not liking it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back to it because it's quite a short read, and maybe it's just a case of getting into it because I've got into the habit over the last, I don't know, 6 months, a year of reading about three books at the same time. So,
Oh, okay,
so
okay,
I've kind of got three books by my bedside table, and that's one of them, and I haven't picked it up for at least a couple of
interesting.
months.
I think also you're going back to John Green, because I remember after reading the book, I thought, wow, that's great. I want to have an analysis of this book because it's so famous. And I think I found that's why I was talking about John Green by coincidence. He talked about it in on a YouTube. I think it was meant for teenagers or something, but he made a YouTube essay about it, and that was really interesting. So maybe John, you should watch John Green's talk about the Great Gatsby, and maybe it'll help you appreciate it more.
Indeed, indeed. And had you seen that when you were a teenager, maybe it would have inspired you as well.
I think YouTube didn't exist at that time.
Well,
I wish
well,
it
that's
had.
true.
I wish it had. I think it
Yeah.
helped in so many ways.
No,
So many ways.
definitely.
Probably wasted a lot of time as well, but
Mm.
so many things I could have found out that didn't find out till later.
Yeah. But
Maybe I'll tell you.
as you say, you've got to come back to these things, don't you? And also, yeah, things that you did enjoy in your childhood, like we spoke about with Roald Dahl. I think, as an adult, come back to those things, and
Yeah.
that's nice to do. I mean, I suppose it's always nice to think about the idea as well of authors in your own language that have been translated well into English. They're always worth reading, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Hmm.
think Elena Ferrante is a good example. I mean, I think it's very well translated into the English language and
Yeah.
very readable for that reason. And
Yeah.
I think there's plenty of books like that nowadays, aren't there, that have been translated very well.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good to read a book that you've already read in your own language and then read it in a foreign language.
Hmm.
That's really makes it a lot easier. Don't need to do it all the time, but when you're starting, you're at a low level in the language. That's a good way to get into books in foreign languages.
Yeah, I agree with that one, definitely. I think that's always a good
I've read a couple
recommendation.
of books. I think I've read because one of my I can mention it here. I know if a book that many people hate but I love is Catcher in the Rye, which I've read many times. Must have read it a dozen times. And when I was young, by J.D. Salinger. Many people hate that book, but I've read it in English, in Spanish, in French, in Italian.
Oh, really?
I
Wow.
think I finished it in Italian, but I know the story so well that it was quite easy to follow.
Yeah, I have read that, but I can't really remember it too well. I think
Okay.
again I read it maybe 15 years ago or so. But
Mm.
yeah, I do
It's one of
remember.
those books where it's going to have more influence on you if you're 16 or 17. If you read it in your 30s or 40s, it's not going to have the same impact.
Hmm.
It's just a story of a 16-year-old. But when you are 16 and you read it, it kind of blows your mind.
Yeah, sure. And
Not everybody.
that's what made you the man
And
you
then
are
again,
today.
I talked about that in a YouTube video I made and about Catcher in the Rye, how much I love the book. And in the comments, people said, "I think this book. Oh, I'm never. I'm unsubscribing because you like this book. I hate it. That's just taste. I hate. I don't like The Alchemist, and that doesn't mean I could
It's all right.
tell you that you're a bad person because you
You,
like it.
you're going to be cancelled for that as well. So if we
Yeah,
talk about your YouTube channel now, people will start unsubscribing because you said that. So
yeah. I made a couple of books on recommendations, which I think I've talked again here. The same bloody old books. I should talk about some other ones. But yeah, I do have a YouTube channel called Let Them Talk TV.
get them
Um,
talk. Let them talk.
FYI. That's his. That's what it is.
Hmm. Excellent. And it's very good. I really enjoy it. So
Thank you.
if you want to have a look at videos of Gideon doing some really interesting stuff, and he does some amazing stuff. You do different things about the history of the English language, don't you? You do some grammar points, you do some things about accents. So I think it's always worth watching those on repeat. I think. So
Yeah, on a loop.
on a loop,
Just
yeah.
watch them all non-stop. All
Mm.
your friends, all your family should watch them constantly.
Yeah, and it's a good excuse if your parents, if you're a bit younger and they're like, "Oh, stop looking at your phone all the time," and you're just like, "I'm looking at Gideon, I'm learning English." So, if
Exactly.
you're going to be
Exactly.
addicted to something, then be addicted to Gideon.
Exactly.
So,
Yes. Good point, John.
uh,
You can come back. Oh,
all
it's
right,
your podcast.
it's my podcast, yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, I'll come back to my podcast, I think.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining me anyway, Gideon. I
A
really appreciate it.
pleasure.
And
Okay.
I hope that that was useful to English learners about what they can read. So I think there's some pretty nice books out there. So yeah, thanks again. And you've been listening to English with Monty.